The rain hammered against the windshield of the black SUV as it approached the heavily fortified gates of Naval Base Coronado. Commander Sarah Mitchell sat in the passenger seat, her jaw clenched as she watched the wipers struggle against the downpour. The base looked different in the storm, darker, more imposing than she remembered from her last visit 3 months ago. "Ma'am, we're approaching the main entrance," her driver, Petty Officer Martinez, announced quietly. He had been her driver for 2 years now, and he knew when his commander was lost in thought. Sarah's reputation preceded her everywhere they went, but today felt different. Today, she was coming home to face the music. Sarah adjusted her uniform one final time, ensuring every detail was perfect. The silver eagles on her collar caught the dim light filtering through the storm clouds. 22 years of service had led to this moment, her first day as the commanding officer of the most elite SEAL team in the world. SEAL Team 7 wasn't just any unit, they were the ghosts that governments called when the impossible needed to be done. They were her responsibility now, her legacy to build or destroy. The SUV slowed to a stop at the security checkpoint. Through the rain-streaked window, Sarah could see a young guard approaching. He couldn't have been more than 22, fresh-faced with the eager demeanor of someone trying to prove himself. His uniform was pristine, regulation perfect, but his movements betrayed his nervousness as he approached the vehicle. Private First Class Danny Rodriguez had been assigned to gate duty for only 3 weeks. It was his first real posting after completing basic training, and he took his responsibilities seriously. Too seriously, perhaps. Every vehicle that passed through these gates was a test of his vigilance, a chance to show his superiors that he was ready for more important assignments. "Good morning," Rodriguez called out as he approached the driver's side window. Martinez rolled it down, immediately feeling the sting of cold raindrops on his face. "I need to see identification and orders for all passengers." Martinez reached for his wallet, but his expression showed mild confusion. "Sir, this is Commander Mitchell. She's expected at headquarters." Rodriguez barely glanced at Martinez before turning his attention to Sarah. What he saw was a woman in her early 40s with shoulder-length auburn hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through him. Her uniform was impeccable, but he noticed something that made him pause. She wasn't wearing the standard base identification badge that all personnel were required to display. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your military ID and any orders authorizing your presence on this base," Rodriguez said, his voice taking on an official tone that he had practiced countless times in front of his mirror. Sarah reached into her jacket pocket and produced her military identification card. The plastic felt cold between her fingers as she handed it through the window. Rodriguez examined it carefully, checking the photo against her face, verifying the expiration date, and ensuring all security features were intact. Everything seemed to be in order, but something nagged at him. "Commander Mitchell," Rodriguez read aloud, his brow furrowing slightly. "I don't see you on today's visitor list, ma'am. And I notice you're not wearing a base access badge." The rain continued to drum against the roof of the SUV, creating a steady rhythm that seemed to underscore the tension building in the confined space. Sarah felt her patience beginning to thin. She had been traveling for 18 hours, flying from a classified location in the Middle East where she had been wrapping up her previous assignment. The last thing she needed was a delay at the front gate of what was supposed to be her new home. "Private," Sarah said, her voice calm but carrying an edge that Martinez recognized as a warning sign. "I'm the new commanding officer of SEAL Team 7. I'm expected at headquarters for my change of command briefing. My orders are classified, but I can assure you that Admiral Harrison is expecting me." Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, but his training had taught him that protocol was protocol, regardless of rank or intimidation tactics. He had heard stories from other guards about officers trying to use their authority to bypass security procedures. His instructors had been clear: no exceptions, no matter who demanded them. "Ma'am, I understand that, but without proper authorization documentation or a base access badge, I cannot permit entry to this installation. If you could contact your sponsor or have them verify your arrival, I'd be happy to assist you." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with a combination of anger and disbelief. In 22 years of service, she had never been denied entry to a military installation. She had commanded respect from generals and admirals, had been trusted with missions that could change the course of nations, and now she was being blocked by a private who looked like he should still be asking permission to use the bathroom. Martinez turned to look at his commander, recognizing the warning signs. He had seen Sarah deal with bureaucratic obstacles before, and it never ended well for the bureaucrats. "Ma'am, perhaps I could call ahead to headquarters and have them send someone down to escort us?" "No," Sarah replied firmly. "This young man wants to follow protocol, then we'll follow protocol." She turned her full attention to Rodriguez, who was beginning to realize that he might have made a serious error in judgment. "Private Rodriguez, isn't it? What's your supervisor's name?" "Sergeant Thompson, ma'am," Rodriguez replied, his voice slightly less confident than it had been moments before. "Call Sergeant Thompson. Tell him that Commander Sarah Mitchell, the new commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, is being denied entry to Naval Base Coronado by one of his guards. Tell him that I'm carrying classified orders that I cannot discuss with unauthorized personnel. And tell him that I've been traveling for 18 hours and my patience is wearing thin." Rodriguez felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. The way she spoke, the authority in her voice, the casual mention of classified orders, it was all beginning to paint a picture that he really didn't want to be part of. But his training had been clear, and his sergeant had been even clearer. No exceptions meant no exceptions. "Ma'am, I appreciate your position, but I still need to see proper authorization or have verification from base personnel before I can grant access. I'm just following orders." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about the men and women of SEAL Team 7 who were waiting for her arrival. They were the best of the best, warriors who had earned their place through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. They deserved a commander who could handle a simple security checkpoint without losing her composure. When she opened her eyes, Rodriguez saw something there that made him take an involuntary step backward. It wasn't anger anymore, it was the cold, calculating look of someone who had seen combat, who had made life-and-death decisions under pressure, and who was rapidly running out of patience for military bureaucracy. "Private Rodriguez," Sarah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "in approximately 30 minutes, Admiral Harrison is going to ask me why I'm late for my briefing. When I tell him that I was delayed at the front gate by a guard who refused to follow proper escalation procedures, what do you think he's going to say?" The question hung in the air as Rodriguez realized that he was in way over his head. His training had covered many scenarios, but none of them had involved potentially blocking a SEAL commander from accessing her own base. The rain continued to fall, but suddenly, the sound seemed ominous rather than merely annoying. Martinez watched the exchange with growing concern. He had seen his commander in action before, had watched her navigate political minefields and tactical nightmares with equal skill. But this situation was different. This was personal. This was about respect, about recognition, about the very foundation of military hierarchy that Sarah had spent her entire career climbing. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tension building inside the vehicle. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder that seemed to underscore the gravity of the moment. Rodriguez stood at the crossroads of his young military career, knowing that his next decision could define his future on this base. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said finally, his voice barely audible over the rain, "if you'll just give me a moment to call this in to my supervisor, I'm sure we can get this sorted out quickly." Sarah nodded slowly, but her expression remained unreadable. "Make the call, Private. But understand this, every minute I sit here is another minute that SEAL Team 7 is without their commanding officer. These are not men who are accustomed to waiting, and neither am I." As Rodriguez walked back toward the guard shack, his boots splashing through puddles that seemed to grow larger with each step, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made the biggest mistake of his military career. The phone call he was about to make would set in motion a series of events that would not only define his future but would also serve as a lesson to every member of the base about the importance of knowing who you're dealing with before you decide to flex your authority. Inside the SUV, Sarah sat in silence, watching the young guard through the rain-streaked window. She thought about all the obstacles she had overcome to reach this point, all the battles fought and won, all the respect earned through years of dedicated service. And now, at the threshold of her greatest achievement, she was being tested by someone who had probably never left the continental United States, let alone commanded men in combat. The irony wasn't lost on her. Tomorrow, she would be briefing some of the most dangerous men in the world on missions that could prevent international incidents or eliminate threats that kept national leaders awake at night. Today, she couldn't even get past the front gate of her own base. Martinez glanced at his commander, noting the way her hands remained relaxed on her lap despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. He had learned to read her moods over the years, and, right now, she was in what he privately called combat mode, completely calm on the surface but ready to react with devastating efficiency if the situation demanded it. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and neither did Commander Sarah Mitchell's resolve to make this young guard understand exactly what kind of mistake he was making. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become legendary within the walls of Naval Base Coronado, a story that would be told and retold in barracks and mess halls for years to come. Rodriguez reached the guard shack and picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly as he dialed his supervisor's extension. As the phone rang, he stared out at the black SUV and wondered if it was too late to undo whatever damage he had already done. The answer to that question would come soon enough, and it would change everything he thought he knew about authority, respect, and the chain of command. Sergeant Michael Thompson was reviewing duty rosters in the security office when his phone rang. With 15 years of military service under his belt, he had seen enough young guards make foolish decisions to know that unexpected calls from the front gate rarely brought good news. He glanced at the clock, 0847 hours, and wondered what crisis awaited him this time. "Security office, Sergeant Thompson speaking," he answered, already reaching for a pen to take notes. "Sergeant, this is Rodriguez at Gate 3, the voice on the other end was tight with barely controlled anxiety. "I have a situation here that requires your immediate attention." Thompson leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. Rodriguez had been enthusiastic but green since his assignment to gate duty, and Thompson had been waiting for the inevitable moment when the kid's inexperience would create a problem. "What's the nature of the situation, Rodriguez?" "Sir, I have a woman here claiming to be Commander Mitchell, the new CO of SEAL Team 7. She doesn't have proper base access authorization, and she's demanding entry without following security protocols." The pen slipped from Thompson's fingers and clattered onto his desk. Commander Sarah Mitchell. The name had been circulating through base security briefings for weeks. The new commanding officer of the most elite unit on the base, a decorated war hero with a reputation that made hardened NCOs speak in respectful whispers. And Rodriguez had just told her she couldn't come onto her own base. "Rodriguez," Thompson said slowly, trying to keep the panic out of his voice, "describe this woman to me." "Auburn hair, green eyes, early 40s. She's wearing dress blues with commander's insignia. Her driver called her Commander Mitchell, but I don't have any documentation proving she's authorized for base access today." Thompson closed his eyes and took a deep breath. In his 15 years of service, he had made his share of mistakes, but none of them had involved potentially insulting a SEAL commander on her first day. This was the kind of mistake that ended careers and became cautionary tales told to new recruits for decades. "Rodriguez, listen to me very carefully," Thompson said, already grabbing his keys and hat. "Do not do anything else. Do not ask for more identification. Do not make any more demands. Just be polite and tell the commander that I'm on my way down to personally escort her to headquarters. Do you understand me?" "But, Sergeant, the protocols clearly state that Rodriguez." Thompson's voice cut through the phone line like a blade. "I don't care what the protocols say. I care about not having to explain to Admiral Harrison why one of my guards detained his new SEAL commander at the front gate. Now do exactly what I told you and pray that she doesn't decide to file a complaint." Thompson hung up the phone and grabbed his radio, quickly switching to the frequency that connected him directly to base headquarters. This was damage control time, and he needed to get ahead of the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. "Base operations, this is security. I need to speak with Admiral Harrison's aide immediately regarding the arrival of Commander Mitchell." The response came back within seconds. "Security, this is Lieutenant Hayes, Admiral Harrison's aide. The Admiral has been expecting Commander Mitchell for her change of command briefing. Is there a problem?" Thompson felt his stomach drop to his boots. Of course the Admiral was expecting her. Of course, this was exactly the kind of situation that could destroy his career. "Sir, there's been a minor delay at Gate 3. Commander Mitchell is being processed through security now. She should be at headquarters within 15 minutes. "A delay?" Lieutenant Hayes' voice carried a note of concern that made Thompson sweat despite the air conditioning. "What kind of delay, Sergeant?" Thompson knew he was walking a tightrope. Tell the truth and risk immediate disciplinary action. Lie and potentially make things worse if the truth came out later. He chose a middle path that he hoped would buy him enough time to fix the situation. "A new guard was being overly cautious with security protocols, sir. I'm personally escorting the commander to headquarters to ensure no further delays." "Understood, Sergeant. I'll inform the Admiral that Commander Mitchell is en route." Thompson clicked off the radio and sprinted toward the exit. Behind his desk, the duty roster he had been working on remained unfinished, but that seemed insignificant compared to the crisis he now faced. As he jogged through the corridors toward Gate 3, he mentally rehearsed the apology he would have to make to one of the most dangerous women in the military. Meanwhile, back at the gate, Rodriguez stood in the guard shack staring at the phone that had just delivered what felt like a death sentence to his military career. Through the rain-streaked window, he could see the black SUV still idling at the checkpoint, its occupants waiting with what he imagined was growing impatience. The rain had intensified, turning the already gray morning into something that felt almost apocalyptic. Rodriguez watched the windshield wipers of the SUV struggle against the downpour and wondered if this was some kind of cosmic punishment for his stubbornness. He had been so proud of his attention to detail, so confident in his adherence to protocol. Now those same qualities felt like anchors dragging him toward disaster. Inside the SUV, Sarah sat with the patience of someone who had learned to control her emotions in situations where losing control meant people died. But, beneath that calm exterior, a storm was building that made the weather outside seem mild by comparison. She had commanded respect in boardrooms filled with generals, had earned the trust of politicians who normally trusted no one, and had led missions where failure meant international incidents. Now she was trapped in a vehicle, unable to begin her new command because a guard with 3 weeks of experience had decided to play by rules he didn't fully understand. Martinez shifted uncomfortably in the driver's seat, acutely aware of the tension radiating from his commander. He had been her driver long enough to recognize the signs, the way her breathing became more controlled, the slight tightening around her eyes, the absolute stillness that preceded action. He had seen her maintain this same composure while briefing senators on classified operations and while coordinating with foreign intelligence services. It was the calm of a professional warrior, and it was beginning to concern him. "Ma'am," Martinez said quietly, "would you like me to call headquarters directly? I have the number for Admiral Harrison's office." Sarah turned to look at him, and, for a moment, Martinez saw past the professional facade to the woman underneath, tired from 18 hours of travel, frustrated by unnecessary delays, and perhaps a little hurt that her homecoming was being treated like a security threat. But, when she spoke, her voice remained level and controlled. "No, Martinez. Let's see how this plays out. Sometimes the best lessons are learned through experience rather than instruction." Her words carried an ominous undertone that made Martinez wonder exactly what kind of lesson Commander Mitchell intended to teach. He had been with her long enough to know that she didn't make idle threats, and her idea of education often left lasting impressions on those who received it. Rodriguez emerged from the guard shack, his uniform now soaked from the short walk through the rain. He approached the SUV with the reluctant steps of a man walking toward his own execution. The confidence he had displayed earlier was completely gone, replaced by the dawning realization that he had made a terrible mistake. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said as he reached the window, water dripping from the brim of his cap, "my supervisor is on his way down to personally escort you to headquarters. I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused." Sarah studied his face through the rain-streaked window. She could see the fear there now, the understanding that his rigid adherence to protocol had created a situation far beyond his ability to handle. Part of her felt sympathy for the young man. She remembered being his age, remembered the pressure to prove herself worthy of the uniform she wore. But another part of her, the part that had been forged in combat and tempered by years of command responsibility, recognized this as a teachable moment. Private Rodriguez, she said, her voice carrying just enough edge to make him straighten involuntarily, do you know what SEAL Team 7 does? Rodriguez swallowed hard before answering. Ma'am, they conduct classified operations in support of national security objectives. That's the official answer, Sarah replied. The real answer is that we do the impossible. We go places that don't exist on maps, we eliminate threats that governments can't acknowledge, and we save lives in situations where conventional forces would fail. The men and women of SEAL Team 7 are the finest warriors this country has ever produced. The rain continued to fall, but Rodriguez barely noticed it anymore. He was beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake, and the weight of it was crushing. Every minute that I sit here, Sarah continued, is another minute the team is without their commander. Every second of delay is time not spent preparing for missions that could prevent terrorist attacks, rescue hostages, or eliminate threats to American lives. Do you understand the gravity of what your protocol has cost today? Rodriguez felt as if he might be sick. The woman he had been treating like a security threat was responsible for operations that could affect national security. The unit he had delayed was composed of warriors whose individual accomplishments exceeded anything he had ever imagined achieving. And he had stopped them from getting their new commander because he was afraid of breaking rules he didn't fully comprehend. Ma'am, I had no idea. I was just following orders, trying to do my job correctly. Sarah's expression softened slightly, not because she forgave his mistake, but because she recognized the sincerity in his voice. She had been young once too, had made errors in judgment that seemed catastrophic at the time. The difference was that her mistakes had been made in training, not while blocking superior officers from doing their jobs. Following orders is admirable, Private. But military service requires more than blind adherence to protocol. It requires judgment, the ability to recognize when following the letter of the law violates its spirit. Today, you learned that lesson the hard way. In the distance, Rodriguez could see a figure running through the rain toward the checkpoint. Even from several hundred yards away, he could tell that the man was moving with the urgency of someone trying to prevent a disaster. That would be Sergeant Thompson, coming to clean up the mess that Rodriguez had created. Private, Sarah said, drawing his attention back to the SUV, when your sergeant arrives, you're going to apologize for this incident. Not because I demand it, but because it's the right thing to do. Then, you're going to return to your post and remember this day. Remember what happens when protocol becomes more important than purpose, when rules matter more than respect. Rodriguez nodded, unable to trust his voice. He could see Thompson approaching now, the sergeant's face a mask of professional composure that barely concealed what Rodriguez imagined was volcanic anger. In a few minutes, he would face the consequences of his decision to prioritize procedure over common sense. But, first, he owed Commander Mitchell the acknowledgement she deserved. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for delaying your arrival and for not recognizing your authority. I hope that my actions today don't reflect poorly on the security personnel of this base. Sarah nodded once, a gesture that conveyed both acceptance of his apology and dismissal of his concerns about his colleagues. She had been dealing with military bureaucracy long enough to know that one guard's mistake didn't represent the entire security apparatus of Naval Base Coronado. Your apology is accepted, Private. Use this experience to become a better soldier. Thompson reached the checkpoint just as Rodriguez stepped back from the SUV. The sergeant's uniform was soaked from his sprint through the rain, and his face bore the expression of a man who had just watched his career flash before his eyes. He approached the vehicle with the deference appropriate for addressing a superior officer, especially one he had just inadvertently insulted. As Thompson prepared to make what he hoped would be an adequate apology to Commander Sarah Mitchell, the rain continued to fall on Naval Base Coronado. But, inside the black SUV, the storm was just beginning to clear. The lesson had been taught, the hierarchy re-established, and the path forward finally illuminated. Now it was time to see what other surprises this first day would bring. Sergeant Thompson arrived at the checkpoint completely drenched, his chest heaving from the sprint across the base. Water streamed from his uniform as he approached the SUV, and his normally composed demeanor was replaced by barely controlled panic. He had spent the entire run mentally rehearsing apologies and damage control strategies, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of facing Commander Mitchell after his subordinate's catastrophic error. "Commander Mitchell," Thompson said, snapping to attention despite the rain soaking through his uniform, "I am Sergeant Michael Thompson, Security Supervisor. I sincerely apologize for this unacceptable delay. Private Rodriguez was acting on incomplete information, and I take full responsibility for his actions." Sarah studied the sergeant through the window. Unlike Rodriguez, Thompson understood the gravity of the situation. His apology was professional, direct, and avoided the excuse-making that often accompanied such incidents. She could see in his posture and expression that he was a competent NCO who had been blindsided by a subordinate's overzealousness. "Sergeant Thompson," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the authority of her rank but lacking the edge that had made Rodriguez sweat, "I appreciate your prompt response. However, I'm more concerned about the training protocols that led to this situation than I am about the delay itself." Martinez rolled down his window completely now, allowing the conversation to proceed without the barrier of glass. The rain immediately began to dampen the interior of the SUV, but Sarah didn't seem to notice. Her focus was entirely on the two men standing before her, each representing different aspects of the military hierarchy she now commanded. "Ma'am, if you'll permit me to escort you to headquarters, I'd like to personally ensure there are no further issues," Thompson offered, already stepping aside to clear the path for the vehicle. "In a moment, Sergeant," Sarah said, raising her hand to pause his movement. "First, I want to understand how a 3-week assignment resulted in a guard who doesn't know when to escalate a situation above his authority level." The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Thompson felt the familiar knot of responsibility settling in his stomach. He had been an NCO long enough to know that when officers started asking about training protocols, someone's career was about to be seriously reviewed. "Ma'am, Private Rodriguez completed all required security training before being assigned to gate duty. However, I believe his interpretation of the protocols was overly rigid. He was attempting to follow the letter of the regulations without considering their intent." Sarah nodded slowly, processing the explanation. She had seen this problem before, young soldiers so eager to prove themselves that they forgot the bigger picture. It was a training issue, but it was also a leadership issue. Someone should have identified Rodriguez's tendency toward inflexibility and addressed it before it created this kind of incident. "Sergeant, how many commanding officers have been denied entry to this base in the past year?" "None, ma'am. This is the first such incident in my experience." "And yet your guard felt confident that denying entry to a commander with valid identification was the appropriate response to his uncertainty?" Thompson felt the weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders. Every word Commander Mitchell spoke was building toward a conclusion that would likely result in significant changes to his security procedures and, possibly, his own position. He had survived 15 years in the military by taking responsibility for his subordinates' actions and learning from mistakes. This situation would test both of those principles. "Ma'am, Private Rodriguez made an error in judgment. He should have immediately escalated the situation to me rather than attempting to resolve it independently. That failure represents a gap in our training that I intend to address immediately." Rodriguez stood slightly behind Thompson, listening to the exchange with growing dread. He could see his military career dissolving in the rain around him, each word of the conversation adding weight to the certainty that he had destroyed any chance of advancement or respect within the service. The woman he had treated with suspicion was demonstrating a level of professionalism and tactical thinking that made his own actions seem even more foolish. "Private Rodriguez," Sarah said, turning her attention directly to the young guard, "you mentioned following orders. Who gave you the order to deny entry to superior officers?" "Ma'am, no one specifically told me to deny entry to officers. The general orders state that all personnel must present proper identification and authorization for base access." "And did I present proper identification?" "Yes, ma'am, you did." "Then, what authorization was I lacking?" Rodriguez felt the trap closing around him, but there was no escape from the logic of her questions. "You didn't have a base access badge or visitor authorization, ma'am." "Private, I'm the commanding officer of SEAL Team 7. This is my base now." What authorization do I need beyond my orders and my identification to enter my own command? The question exposed the fundamental flaw in Rodriguez's reasoning, and everyone present knew it. He had been so focused on following procedures that he had forgotten the purpose those procedures were meant to serve. Base security was designed to keep unauthorized personnel out, not to prevent commanding officers from reaching their units. Ma'am, I understand now that I made a serious error in judgment. I should have recognized your authority and either granted access immediately or escalated the situation to my supervisor. Sarah appreciated the directness of his answer, even if it came too late to undo the damage. She had dealt with enough bureaucratic obstacles in her career to recognize genuine contrition when she heard it. The question now was whether this incident represented a learning opportunity or a fundamental incompatibility with military service. Sergeant Thompson, Sarah continued, I want a written report on this incident within 24 hours. Include a detailed analysis of current security protocols, identification of training gaps, and recommendations for preventing similar situations. Additionally, I want Private Rodriguez to undergo additional training on escalation procedures and officer recognition. Yes, ma'am. I'll have the report completed and submitted to your office by 0900 tomorrow. Furthermore, Sarah added, I want every security guard on this base to understand that SEAL Team 7 operates under different parameters than conventional units. We may arrive at unusual hours, we may not always follow standard notification procedures, and we may be carrying classified materials that cannot be discussed at checkpoints. Your security protocols need to account for those realities. Thompson nodded, already mentally drafting the training updates that would be required. Commander Mitchell was right. Special operations units operated under different rules than regular military personnel, and his security procedures needed to reflect that understanding. The rain was beginning to lighten, but the tension around the checkpoint remained thick. Rodriguez stood at attention, waiting for what he assumed would be the final blow to his career. Thompson maintained his professional composure, but internally he was calculating the damage this incident might cause to his own advancement prospects. And Sarah sat in the SUV, weighing the lessons that needed to be learned against the mercy that could be shown. Private Rodriguez, Sarah said finally, you made a significant error today, but it was an error born of inexperience rather than malice. You'll complete the additional training Sergeant Thompson assigns, and you'll remember this day every time you're tempted to prioritize procedure over common sense. Consider this your education in the realities of military command. Rodriguez felt a wave of relief wash over him that was almost as powerful as the rain that had been soaking him for the past 20 minutes. He had expected court-martial proceedings, disciplinary action, maybe even discharge from the service. Instead, he was being given a chance to learn from his mistake and continue his career. Ma'am, thank you for your understanding. I won't forget this lesson. See that you don't, Private. The military doesn't have room for soldiers who can't distinguish between following orders and thinking critically. Martinez had been listening to the entire exchange with growing admiration for his commander's handling of the situation. He had seen her deal with international diplomats and enemy combatants, but watching her manage this delicate balance between discipline and mentorship was perhaps more impressive than any of her combat achievements. Sergeant Thompson, Sarah continued, I assume the route to headquarters is clear from this point? Yes, ma'am. I'll escort you personally to ensure there are no further delays. That won't be necessary, Sergeant. I trust that word of this incident will reach the appropriate personnel before I encounter any more security checkpoints. Thompson understood the implication immediately. By the time Commander Mitchell reached headquarters, every guard on the base would know exactly who she was and what had happened at Gate 3. The story would spread through the security network faster than any official notification, and no one would risk repeating Rodriguez's mistake. As Thompson stepped back and gestured for Rodriguez to raise the security barrier, Sarah felt a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion wash over her. The incident had been resolved with minimal damage to all involved, but it had also consumed nearly an hour of her first day in command. She still had briefings to attend, personnel to meet, and the enormous responsibility of taking over the most elite military unit in the world. Martinez, let's proceed to headquarters. And next time we approach a gate, perhaps you should lead with my credentials rather than my pleasantries." "Yes, ma'am." Noted for future reference. The SUV moved forward through the now raised barrier, its tires splashing through the puddles that had formed during the extended delay. Rodriguez and Thompson watched the vehicle disappear into the base, both men processing the encounter in their own ways. For Rodriguez, it was a lesson in humility and the importance of understanding the spirit of regulations rather than just their letter. He had learned that military service required more than following orders. It demanded critical thinking, situational awareness, and the wisdom to know when rules served their purpose and when they became obstacles to mission accomplishment. For Thompson, it was a reminder that leadership meant taking responsibility not just for direct actions but for the training and development of subordinates. Commander Mitchell had been professional and fair, but she had also made it clear that such incidents reflected on the entire security apparatus. He would spend the next several hours drafting new protocols and scheduling additional training sessions. As the black SUV navigated the base roads toward headquarters, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection. The incident at the gate had been frustrating and unnecessary, but it had also provided valuable insight into the culture and procedures of her new command. If a simple gate guard felt empowered to delay a commanding officer, what other bureaucratic obstacles might she encounter in her efforts to lead SEAL Team 7? The rain continued to fall on Naval Base Coronado, washing away the puddles and the immediate evidence of the morning's confrontation. But the lessons learned at Gate 3 would ripple through the base for weeks to come, serving as a reminder that respect and authority are earned through competence and character, not just rank and regulations. Commander Sarah Mitchell had passed her first test as the new commanding officer, and everyone involved had learned something valuable about leadership, protocol, and the delicate balance between following orders and thinking for oneself. The black SUV pulled up to the imposing facade of the Naval Base Coronado headquarters building at exactly 0915 hours. The delay at the gate had cost Sarah precious time, but she had learned long ago that arriving flustered or apologetic only invited further complications. Instead, she took a moment to compose herself, checking her uniform one final time and mentally shifting into the command presence that would define her interactions for the rest of the day. Martinez brought the vehicle to a smooth stop under the covered entrance, protecting them from the lingering rain. "Ma'am, shall I wait here or find parking?" "Park the vehicle and report to the security office, Martinez. Tell them you're my driver and get yourself properly credentialed for base access. I don't want a repeat of this morning's performance." "Understood, ma'am. Good luck with your briefings." Sarah stepped out of the SUV and immediately felt the weight of multiple sets of eyes upon her. Word of the gate incident had clearly preceded her arrival, and the personnel moving in and out of headquarters were stealing glances at the commander who had been detained at her own base. She ignored the attention and walked purposefully toward the entrance, her posture conveying confidence and authority despite the morning setback. The lobby of the headquarters building was a study in military efficiency and tradition. Polished floors reflected the overhead lighting, while displays of naval history and unit commendations covered the walls. Behind an imposing reception desk sat a petty officer whose crisp uniform and alert demeanor suggested that word of Commander Mitchell's arrival had reached even the lowest levels of the administrative structure. "Commander Mitchell," the receptionist said, standing immediately upon recognizing her, "Lieutenant Hayes is waiting to escort you to Admiral Harrison's office. He's in the elevator lobby on your right." Sarah nodded her thanks and walked toward the designated area, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Lieutenant Hayes appeared to be in his late 20s, with the earnest expression of an officer still eager to prove himself worthy of his position as the Admiral's aide. He snapped to attention as she approached, his movements precise and respectful. "Commander Mitchell, welcome to Naval Base Coronado. Admiral Harrison sends his compliments and asks me to escort you to his office for your change of command briefing." "Thank you, Lieutenant. I trust the Admiral hasn't been waiting long?" Hayes glanced at his watch with barely concealed anxiety. "The Admiral understands there was a minor delay at security, ma'am. He's adjusted his schedule accordingly." As they entered the elevator, Sarah studied the young officer's reflection in the polished doors. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he avoided direct eye contact. Word of the gate incident had definitely reached Admiral Harrison, and Hayes was clearly uncomfortable being caught in the middle of what might become a disciplinary issue. "Lieutenant," Sarah said as the elevator climbed toward the third floor, "how long have you been the Admiral's aide?" 14 months, ma'am. I'm scheduled to rotate to a C assignment next quarter. And, in those 14 months, how many commanding officers have you escorted to change of command briefings? Hayes considered the question carefully before answering. You're the 7th, ma'am, but the first for a special operations unit. Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. SEAL Team 7 wasn't just another unit on the base, it was the premier special operations force, and her appointment as its commander represented a significant milestone in her career and a critical responsibility for the base leadership. The elevator doors opened onto a corridor lined with photographs of previous base commanders and distinguished visitors. Sarah recognized several faces from her own career, generals and admirals she had briefed, politicians she had advised, and fellow officers who had shaped the modern military establishment. Soon, her own photograph might join this gallery of leadership. Lieutenant Hayes led her to a heavy wooden door marked with Admiral Harrison's name and rank. He knocked twice, waited for permission to enter, then opened the door and stepped aside to allow Sarah to enter first. Admiral James Harrison was a man who commanded respect through presence rather than bluster. At 62, he possessed the weathered dignity of an officer who had seen combat, managed crises, and earned his position through competence rather than politics. His office reflected his personality, functional, organized, and decorated with mementos that spoke to a lifetime of naval service rather than personal aggrandizement. "Commander Mitchell," Admiral Harrison said, rising from behind his desk and extending his hand, "welcome to Naval Base Coronado. Please, have a seat. Lieutenant Hayes, close the door and hold my calls." Sarah shook the Admiral's hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact that suggested he was evaluating her as much as greeting her. She took the offered chair and waited for him to return to his seat before speaking. "Admiral, thank you for accommodating the delay in my arrival. I understand there may have been some confusion at the security checkpoint." Harrison leaned back in his chair and studied her with the calculating gaze of a career military officer. "Commander, in 38 years of naval service, I've learned that how someone handles unexpected obstacles often reveals more about their character than any fitness report or performance evaluation. Your handling of this morning's situation suggests that SEAL Team 7 is getting the kind of leader they deserve." The comment caught Sarah slightly off guard. She had expected either an apology for the gate incident or questions about her delayed arrival. Instead, the Admiral was treating the situation as if it had been a test rather than an embarrassment. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand. Commander, do you think it's a coincidence that Private Rodriguez, a guard with 3 weeks of experience, was assigned to the gate at the exact time of your arrival? Do you think it's accidental that he decided to interpret security protocols in the most rigid way possible when faced with a superior officer?" Sarah felt a cold realization beginning to form in the back of her mind. The morning's events suddenly took on a different context, and she found herself re-evaluating everything that had transpired at the checkpoint. "Sir, are you suggesting that the incident was deliberate?" Admiral Harrison opened a folder on his desk and removed what appeared to be an evaluation form. "Commander, you're about to take command of the most elite military unit in the world. The men and women of SEAL Team 7 have completed missions that remain classified at the highest levels. They prevented terrorist attacks, rescued hostages from impossible situations, and eliminated threats that could have destabilized entire regions. They don't follow conventional military hierarchy because their work transcends conventional military thinking." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle before continuing. "Those same men and women have been watching you for months, waiting to see if you possess the qualities necessary to lead them. Your previous commands were impressive, but they were conventional forces operating under conventional parameters. SEAL Team 7 requires something different." Sarah felt her understanding of the morning's events shifting completely. What she had interpreted as bureaucratic incompetence was actually a carefully orchestrated evaluation of her leadership style and temperament under pressure. The incident at the gate was designed to test how you respond to unexpected authority challenges, how you handle bureaucratic obstacles, and whether you can maintain professional composure when faced with frustrating delays. Private Rodriguez was following a script, though he didn't know it. Sergeant Thompson's response was genuine. He believed his subordinate had made a catastrophic error. Admiral Harrison closed the folder and met her eyes directly. Your response to that situation demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership SEAL Team 7 needs. You didn't lose your temper, you didn't pull rank unnecessarily, and you used the incident as a teaching opportunity rather than a punishment opportunity. You showed mercy where it was warranted and firmness where it was required. Sarah sat quietly for a moment, processing the revelation that her first challenge as SEAL Team 7's commander had been an elaborate test of her character and leadership ability. She thought about Rodriguez's nervousness, Thompson's panic, and her own careful navigation of the situation. Every action had been observed and evaluated by people she hadn't even known were watching. Admiral, with respect, that seems like an elaborate way to evaluate a commander who already has 22 years of service and multiple combat deployments. Harrison smiled for the first time since she had entered his office. Commander, SEAL Team 7 doesn't operate according to normal military standards. Their missions are too sensitive, their capabilities too unique, and their value too high to risk on untested leadership. Every member of that team has volunteered for assignments that carry extraordinary personal risk in service of national security objectives that most military personnel never even hear about. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the base, his hands clasped behind his back in the classic pose of a senior officer contemplating weighty matters. The previous commander of SEAL Team 7 was relieved of duty after a classified incident involving unauthorized disclosure of mission parameters to an outside agency. The team has been operating under temporary leadership for 3 months while we searched for someone with the right combination of operational experience, tactical acumen, and unshakable integrity. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. She had known that SEAL Team 7 was an elite unit, but the Admiral's briefing was revealing layers of complexity and importance that went far beyond anything she had imagined. Your psychological profile indicates that you respond to challenges with analysis rather than emotion, that you prioritize mission accomplishment over personal comfort, and that you possess the kind of moral courage necessary to make difficult decisions under pressure. This morning's test confirmed those assessments. Admiral Harrison returned to his desk and opened another folder, this one considerably thicker than the first. Commander, what I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. SEAL Team 7's current operational status includes ongoing missions in locations I can't name, threats that I can't describe, and capabilities that must never be publicly acknowledged. He handed her a document marked with classification stamps that indicated security clearances she had held but rarely encountered. Your change of command ceremony is scheduled for Friday. Between now and then, you'll receive briefings on current operations, personnel files for your team members, and intelligence assessments that will inform your initial strategic decisions as their commander. Sarah accepted the document, noting its weight and the security measures surrounding its handling. This was the moment when her new command became real, when the responsibilities and authorities that came with leading SEAL Team 7 were formally transferred to her care. Admiral, I understand the significance of this assignment and the trust you're placing in me. SEAL Team 7 will have the leadership it deserves. Harrison nodded once, a gesture that conveyed both satisfaction and expectation. Commander, your first team briefing is scheduled for 1,400 hours in Conference Room Alpha. Lieutenant Hayes will provide you with directions and ensure you have everything you need. As Sarah prepared to leave the Admiral's office, she realized that the morning's delay at the gate had been more than just an inconvenience. It had been her first real test as SEAL Team 7's commander, and apparently she had passed. Now came the harder part, proving that she could lead the most elite warriors in the world on missions that could determine the fate of nations. Conference Room Alpha was located in the most secure section of the headquarters building, accessible only through multiple security checkpoints and biometric scanners that verified Sarah's identity at each stage. The room itself was a study in technological sophistication hidden behind unremarkable government furniture. Every surface was equipped with anti-surveillance measures, and the walls contained shielding that prevented electronic eavesdropping from outside sources. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, using the time to review the personnel files Admiral Harrison had provided. Each folder contained the kind of information that made her appreciate the magnitude of her new responsibility. These weren't just elite soldiers, they were human weapons, each possessing skills and experience that represented years of specialized training and operational refinement. Master Chief Petty Officer David Tank Rodriguez was the team's senior enlisted advisor, a man whose 28 years of service included deployments to every active conflict zone of the past 3 decades. His file contained commendations for actions that remained classified, but the breadth of his experience suggested someone who had seen everything the military could offer and had emerged stronger for it. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen was the team's intelligence officer, a woman whose academic credentials included advanced degrees in Middle Eastern studies and cyber warfare, supplemented by operational experience that had taken her from the Pentagon to field assignments in locations that weren't supposed to exist on any official maps. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Diesel Washington served as the team's explosive ordnance specialist, a role that required the kind of technical precision and steady nerves that came only through extensive training and repeated exposure to life-or-death situations. His file indicated that he had personally disarmed over 300 improvised explosive devices during his career. The remaining team members represented equally impressive combinations of specialized skills and operational experience. As Sarah read through their files, she began to understand why Admiral Harrison had considered this morning's gate incident such an important test. These were people who had earned their positions through demonstrated competence under extreme pressure, and they would expect their new commander to possess the same qualifications. At exactly 1,400 hours, the conference room door opened and 8 individuals entered in single file. Their movements were coordinated without being obvious, each person taking a position that provided optimal situational awareness while maintaining the appearance of casual military bearing. Sarah recognized the unconscious tactical thinking that marked truly elite personnel. They were assessing threats, identifying exit routes, and positioning themselves for maximum effectiveness even in a routine briefing. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped forward and called the group to attention. SEAL Team 7, Commanding Officer arriving. As you were, Sarah said immediately, gesturing for them to take their seats around the conference table. Thank you all for accommodating the schedule change from this morning. She studied each face as they settled into their chairs, noting the careful way they evaluated her without appearing to stare. These were people accustomed to reading situations and personalities quickly, and she knew that every aspect of her bearing and demeanor was being catalogued and assessed. Before we begin formal introductions, Sarah continued, I want to address what I'm sure you've all heard about this morning's incident at the security checkpoint. Lieutenant Commander Chen leaned forward slightly, her expression suggesting professional interest rather than mere curiosity. Ma'am, we understand there was some confusion regarding base access protocols. Sarah appreciated the diplomatic phrasing, but she also recognized that these people deserved the truth rather than euphemisms. The truth is that I was detained at the front gate by a guard who didn't recognize my authority or understand when to escalate a situation beyond his level of responsibility. What I learned afterward is that the incident was designed as an evaluation of my leadership style and decision-making under pressure. The team members exchanged glances that lasted only fractions of seconds, but Sarah caught the subtle communication that passed between them. They had known about the test, or at least suspected it. These were people who understood the necessity of evaluating new leadership before committing to follow it into life-threatening situations. Master Chief Rodriguez spoke for the group. Ma'am, if I may, the team has been operating under temporary command for 3 months. We've completed 6 classified missions during that time, but we understand the importance of having permanent leadership before undertaking more complex operations. Sarah nodded, appreciating his directness. Master Chief, I've reviewed the operational summaries from those missions. The performance metrics indicate that this team maintained operational effectiveness despite the leadership transition. That speaks well of the professionalism and dedication of everyone in this room. Chief Washington shifted in his chair, his expression suggesting he had questions he was uncertain whether to voice. Sarah recognized the hesitation. Enlisted personnel often struggled with the balance between respect for authority and the need to evaluate new commanders honestly. Chief Washington, you have something you'd like to say? Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Granted. In fact, I want all of you to understand that this team's mission requirements may necessitate frank discussions about tactical decisions and operational challenges. I need your honest assessments, not diplomatic pleasantries. Washington leaned forward, his scarred hands clasped on the table in front of him. "Ma'am, we've reviewed your service record and operational history. Your conventional command experience is impressive, but special operations requires different thinking. How do you plan to adapt your leadership style to manage a team that operates outside normal military parameters?" The question was direct and challenging, exactly what Sarah had hoped to hear. These people weren't interested in empty reassurances or generic leadership platitudes. They wanted to know if their new commander understood the unique demands of their work and possessed the flexibility to lead them effectively. "Chief, you're absolutely right that special operations requires different thinking. Conventional command structures work when you're dealing with large units, standard equipment, and missions that follow established doctrine. SEAL Team 7 operates in situations where doctrine doesn't exist, where improvisation is required, and where individual judgment often matters more than following orders." She paused, making eye contact with each team member before continuing. "My role as your commander isn't to micromanage your tactical decisions or second-guess your professional expertise. My job is to ensure you have the resources, intelligence, and support necessary to accomplish missions that others consider impossible. When you're in the field, you're the experts. When you're here, I'm responsible for making sure you're prepared for whatever comes next." Lieutenant Commander Chen nodded approvingly. "Ma'am, that approach aligns with how we've operated successfully in the past. Our missions often require rapid adaptation to changing circumstances, and micromanagement from command elements has historically created more problems than it solved." Sarah felt a slight sense of relief. The intellectual framework she had developed for leading SEAL Team 7 was apparently consistent with their operational experience and expectations. The challenge now would be proving that she could implement that philosophy under pressure. "Let's talk about current operational status," Sarah said, opening the classified folder Admiral Harrison had provided. "I've been briefed on 3 ongoing missions that require command attention. I want each relevant team member to provide a tactical assessment and resource requirements for their assigned operation." For the next 2 hours, Sarah listened as her new team members briefed her on missions that redefined her understanding of military capabilities and national security challenges. The operations they described involved technology she had only heard rumors about, insertion methods that sounded like science fiction, and objectives that could prevent international crises or eliminate threats that conventional forces couldn't even detect. Master Chief Rodriguez concluded the briefings by addressing the elephant in the room. "Ma'am, these missions require absolute trust between team members and between the team and command. We need to know that you'll support our decisions in the field, even when they deviate from original planning." Sarah understood the implication immediately. SEAL Team 7's missions often evolved rapidly, requiring split-second decisions that could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Her team members needed to know that their new commander would back their professional judgment rather than second-guess their choices from the safety of a command center. "Master Chief, let me be clear about my command philosophy. I will give you the best possible intelligence, the most appropriate resources, and clear mission objectives. Once you're deployed, you have my complete authority to accomplish those objectives using whatever methods you determine are necessary. I will defend your decisions to anyone who questions them, up to and including the Joint Chiefs of Staff." The room fell silent as the team members processed her words. This was exactly the kind of command support they needed, but it also represented significant personal risk for Sarah. By giving them such broad authority, she was accepting responsibility for outcomes she couldn't directly control. Chief Petty Officer Lisa Ghostmorgan, the team's communications specialist, spoke for the first time. "Ma'am, that level of trust is exactly what we need to operate effectively. But it also means you're putting your career on the line every time we deploy. Are you comfortable with that level of risk?" Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the conference room. "Chief, I didn't accept this command because it was safe. I accepted it because SEAL Team 7 represents the pinnacle of military capability, and leading this team is the greatest honor of my career. Your success is my success, and your failures are my responsibility. I'm comfortable with those terms." The change in the room's atmosphere was subtle but unmistakable. The team members' posture shifted from professional courtesy to something approaching acceptance. They were beginning to see their new commander not as an obstacle to be managed, but as a leader who understood their unique requirements and was prepared to support them accordingly. As the briefing concluded and the team members prepared to leave, Master Chief Rodriguez approached Sarah's position at the head of the table. "Ma'am, if I may, the team would like to invite you to an informal gathering this evening. Nothing official, just an opportunity to get to know each other outside the formal command structure." Sarah understood the significance of the invitation. These people were offering her the chance to earn their personal trust and respect, separate from the authority that came with her rank. It was an opportunity that might not come again if she declined. "Master Chief, I'd be honored to attend." "Where and when?" "The Anchor Club, 1900 hours. Civilian clothes, off-duty conversation." As the conference room emptied and Sarah gathered her classified materials for secure storage, she reflected on the day's events. The morning's test at the security checkpoint had been designed to evaluate her character under pressure. The afternoon's briefing had revealed the extraordinary nature of her new responsibilities. Tonight's invitation represented the next phase of her integration into SEAL Team 7, earning the personal trust and respect of the most elite warriors in the military. The rain had stopped, and, through the conference room windows, she could see patches of blue sky beginning to appear between the clouds. It seemed like a fitting metaphor for her first day in command. The storms were clearing, the obstacles had been overcome, and the real work of leading SEAL Team 7 was about to begin. As Sarah prepared to leave headquarters and prepare for the evening ahead, she thought about Private Rodriguez, still manning his post at the front gate. He had unknowingly played a crucial role in her evaluation as SEAL Team 7's new commander, and his rigid adherence to protocol had actually served as the catalyst for demonstrating her leadership capabilities under pressure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, and new tests of her ability to command the world's most elite military unit. But today had proven that she possessed the temperament, judgment, and professional courage necessary to lead warriors whose individual capabilities exceeded anything she had previously imagined. The gate incident that had seemed like such an obstacle that morning now felt like exactly the kind of preparation she had needed for the responsibilities ahead. SEAL Team 7 deserved a commander who could handle unexpected challenges with grace and wisdom, and apparently she had proven herself worthy of that trust.